Welcome to the Wabi-Sabi kimono making video. Here I have a paper representation of the fabric panel. They come in 6 fabric choices and are being printed as I speak. So here's an example of our t-shirt fabric panel. This one's printed on stretch lycra. You will also receive a copy of our kimono pattern in the kit, so you can cut out the pattern and make lots more kimonos in the future. If you have the pre-printed fabric panel, you can go ahead and simply cut out your shapes. If you've only purchased the pattern, or you're making extra kimonos in your own fabric, then I will show you how to cut out the pattern in fabric. We have a wide range of specially designed fabrics in our Wabi-Sabi Life shop over on Etsy. Our prints are extra small and specially designed for dolls' garments. We also have a PDF making guide over at Wabi-Sabi Studios that you can download if you'd like extra information. You'll also need to gather together a sewing machine or a hand sewing needle and some good quality sewing thread. Tape measure's also handy for this project. Some paper scissors, fabric shears and some snips are handy but not essential. I always find a fabric marking pen useful. Some fabric clips, which I'm keeping in my little Wabi-Sabi purse. If you have the fabric panel that's pre-printed with the shapes, you just need to go ahead and cut out your shapes, so you can skip over this part to the sewing section of the video. If you're using your own fabric for the kimono, then you'll need to cut out your pattern pieces. You are safe to skip this section of the video if you have our pre-printed fabric panel. So just go ahead and cut out your fabric shapes. I very much prefer to cut my pattern pieces on a single layer of fabric. However, if you take a look at your pattern sheet, you will see several options for cutting out. You may choose to cut out on a folded piece of fabric if you're working with a plain fabric. And here's the guide for that. There are many options. I choose to lay my pieces on a single layer of fabric when working with a print, so I can place my print where I want it. Here you can see I've placed the heart shapes just where I want them. I've also placed my heart shapes directly down the centre back of the pattern. And again, I've made sure that my hearts are exactly where I want them on the other front piece. Take your time to place the pattern pieces as you want them. You'll notice I've made extra paper copies to make placing the pieces easier. And if my pattern weights are looking like donuts to you, then you're probably a little bit hungry. All the fabric quantities you need are marked on the pattern piece sheet. I took my time to cut out the pieces, making sure the heart shapes were just where I want them. I certainly chose a challenging fabric for my first kimono. Now you need to go around each pattern piece, marking all the notches. I use a dissolvable fabric pen, or you can make a small notch, but remember you only have a very small seam allowance, so only take a tiny notch or you'll end up with a hole in your kimono. I'm also using a scrap of fabric I have for the belt, or obi, and I've seamed it to create a whole piece before cutting out. Place the back kimono right side up on the table. Take the two front pieces and match them together at the shoulders, with centre fronts at the centre front. Sew both shoulder seams. Use clips to hold the fabric sections in place. I use a technique I call the U-turn when sewing these tiny garments. It helps avoid the machine chewing up the fabric and makes a strong seam without having to back tack. This means sewing from one edge of the seam, stopping with the needle down at the end of the seam and turning the whole work around and sewing back to the start. I use a little platform to sew off. Press and neaten the shoulder seams towards the back. How you choose to neaten the seams is up to you. If you have a serger or overlocker, the seams are designed to be wide enough to take an overlocked edge. You can zigzag stitch the raw edges or apply special glue to stop the fabric from fraying. Sew the sleeve seams in the same way you sewed the shoulder seams. Again, neaten and press them towards the back. I use the same technique of sewing off my little platform and making the U-turn. Snip all loose threads. Check your seams are neat and accurate and face towards the back of the kimono. Also check that all your notches are visible. Turn the main body of the kimono with the right side up. Place the sleeves to the main body with right sides together, matching at the shoulder seam. Sew between the notches. Remember, the lower part of the sleeve is left unsewn for now. You can see that this time I was able to back tack when stitching, as I was sewing directly on the fabric and not onto a raw edge. Give your kimono a gentle press. make sure that all the seam allowances are facing in the right direction. Press the sleeve hems inwards as shown. Remember, we only have a small amount of seam allowance here. The sleeve seams can be neatened at this point if you choose to. Note that we are simply pressing in a crease. We're not sewing the sleeve hem at this point. Place the kimono folded flat as shown and stitch from the underarm to the sleeve hem around the curved edge of the sleeve. Do the same for the other side. Continue to sew the side seams of the main kimono from the notch position to the hemline. Or you can choose to stitch from the underarm position to the hemline. It's up to you. Now sew from the notch position on the sleeve hem to the bottom of the sleeve. Turn the kimono through to the right side. Take a little time to shape and turn through the sleeves. Preparing the collar. Take the two sets of collar pairs and place them with the right sides together and sew a seam at the back neck. Press the back neck seams open to reduce the bulk. Give your collar pieces a press. Place the two joined sections with their right sides together and sew around the curved edge leaving the straight edge open. I've stitched my collar and now I'm giving it another press. Turn the collar through to the right side, gently rolling the seam edges. Use the warmth of your fingers first to shape the collar. When you're happy, give the collar a final press. Now we have our collar and our kimono. I'm going to hem my sleeves and my kimono hem all in one go with my machine. Remember, you can sew the sleeve hem by hand if you choose, as this is quite a tricky step. Press the hems first and neaten the seam edges if you choose, and then hem. Now my hems are complete, I can attach the collar. Match the collar to the main kimono, making sure the back neck seam meets the centre back notch of the main kimono. You can find the notches on the pattern. If you choose to leave a gap for the belt or obi, then make sure you mark the notches so that you don't forget on your fabric. Remember that leaving the gap for the obi or belt is optional, and you may choose not to do this. Make sure that the hem of the garment meets the hem of the collar at the intersection of the seam allowance. If you have an overlocker or serger, you may decide to neaten this seam, as this is the seam that will be most visible. If you don't have an overlocker or serger, then you may choose to zigzag this seam to neaten. In this example, I have shown you how to sew the kimono, leaving gaps for the belt or obi. However, you don't need to leave the gaps if you choose to wrap the belt or obi around the garment. The obi belt keeps the kimono in place. In addition, an obi belt can be a beautiful accessory around the waist. I'm going to show you how to make a plain obi but you can be as creative as you want to be. The belt or obi can also be padded with batting to give it some body and decorative stitches applied. Fold your rectangular piece of fabric in half and sew all around the edge, leaving a small gap to turn through. Turn the obi through. Hand stitch the gap closed and give your obi a final press. Trim off any loose threads from your garment. There's so much more you can do with the obi, so why not let your creativity go wild? Sewing a kimono on this scale is certainly a challenging project, but when you see how beautiful Akari looks in hers, I think it's worth it. I was inspired to make another one in this beautiful heart fabric modelled on my miniature mannequin. Take a look at our Etsy store for more exciting projects.